Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast in association with eBay Motors Group. It is Saturday the 14th of November and you're joined by myself, Philip Nothard.
And me, Curtis Hutchinson. So this is episode 391 of Motor Trade Radio, bringing you all the chatter that matters. And another busy week. We've got loads of headlines, and we say this most weeks that it's probably easier to. It's not easier. It's actually difficult to draw up the list and choose which ones not to cover. But we've got a good selection this week.
We have. I mean, as you say, every week, and we'll get onto things shortly. But I mean, you just look at some headlines in the morning, and by the afternoon they can totally change. Something else comes out. It's moving at such a quick rate at the minute. It's phenomenal in terms of the headlines. And as we pointed out last Saturday, it's not just the automotive sector. I mean, headlines in generally are just all over the place, aren't they?
They are indeed, yes. Yeah, I heard this morning that we're out of recession, but that could change by the time we go live.
They did put a caveat on the end of it, not to get too excited that, it's a state of the market at the minute with the GDP and recession, etc. But things can change, so I think there's a bit of a warning at the end of that, not to get too overzealous with it.
Yeah, and just a shout out that last week we had an interview with Darren Martin, which is obviously still available. Apologies for the sound quality, but it's worth revisiting or visiting afresh if you haven't heard it, because that was a timely update on how used values are looking right now and into Q4.
And we've got some big headlines, as you say, but we have actually got a guest on today as well, haven't we?
We have, yes. Yeah, we've got a guest. We've got Dale Wyatt, who's going to talk us through a headline that we've picked up from car dealers. So let me just take you through the headline. So that particular headline is Suzuki GB to pay its dealers up to £10,000 in December for being COVID safe and lockdown ready. So we'll find out exactly what that means in a minute. Welsh 17-day fire break lockdown had a devastating impact on car dealers, with sales crawling to a halt. That's another story from Car Dealer, and they've spoken to a couple of dealers in Wales about their experience of the fire break there. Parkers finds 95% of car buyers remain in market despite the lockdown. Average pay at dealer groups falls for the second year. That's the BDO survey, so we'll have a look at that. The used car market grows by 4.4% in Q3. And finally this week, fancy a drink, Phil?
Well, there's a surprise there, isn't there? And,
there is, yes.
We'll get onto that one later. But we must get over first of all to welcome Dale to the show again, and it's some time, I think, since you were last on, Dale. So Dale Wyatt, who is the GB boss for Suzuki in the UK. So welcome to the show again, Dale.
Hi guys, thanks for having me back. I didn't mess it up last time, I guess, so it's good to be back.
No, well, welcome back, Dale. I outlined the headline there, which was Suzuki GB to pay its dealers up to £10,000 in December for being COVID safe and lockdown ready. Can you just take us through the programme, which really incentivizes and rewards Suzuki dealers for being COVID safe and lockdown ready? What does that actually cover?
Yeah, for me, it was about making sure that dealers had the right mindset, Curtis and Philip. It was about making sure that dealers were doing the right things to maximise the revenue opportunity that's still there. So we decided to reward proactivity and give our dealers one last chance, a little nudge to kind of do the right things.
Yes.
So for us, it was great. We created 13 elements and created a 3-tier program with tier 1 paying the dealers £5,000, tier 2 £7,500, tier 3 £10,000. We've got a criteria of competencies we want them to achieve in order to earn the money. So from our perspective, it's about getting dealers to invest in their own business and make sure that they can make the most of any retailing opportunities that are still out there.
And did you actually, how long did it take you to develop this? Because there wasn't an awful lot of time, between the lockdown in England being announced and it being implemented. So, how quickly were you able to pull this together?
In a couple of days, in my normal fashion, I made the announcement before we'd worked out the detail. So I got the business. I got the business pretty focused over the last couple of days, and we published the details yesterday.
And I mean, it's interesting as well. I mean, sorry to put in there. I mean, it's just, we've seen what the market's been doing, haven't we, since the first lockdown, and as we've said right at the start of the show, that things are moving so quickly. But for you guys as a manufacturer, I mean, you've had to react very quickly, haven't you, on this?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the average dealer has an opportunity to get revenue at between 1/3 and 2/3 of their normal revenue, depending on their own geographic situation. And we saw during the last lockdown that dealer results varied considerably. What we wanted to do was try and level the playing field and learn from the best and try and maximise our opportunity and put some bread on the table.
And one of the things that comes out of this particular story in Car Dealer is that it seems to be based around resolving any digital disconnects that might be in the network. So I was just wondering how much of an issue this digital disconnect was amongst your dealers.
Well, we did an audit and found that most dealers were doing some things, but in most dealers' cases there were little things missing. And we thought by creating a best practice list, every dealer, irrespective of the digital competency, would get incremental gains. So some dealers have got some small things to do, and other dealers have got quite a lot to do. We found that about 1/3 of our dealers didn't have live chat. About 1/3 of our dealers didn't have a reserve a car function.
Yeah.
And we think those two elements are quite fundamental in terms of being able to retail in a COVID world.
So is this about, I mean, just before we move on to the next question there, but is this about obviously making sure that, because at the end of the day, the dealers are the front line for Suzuki, aren't they? They're your customer facing element for Suzuki. So it's a case of, in many ways, trying to support your dealer network, trying to make sure that they are doing the right thing on behalf of yourselves as Suzuki, and that there is some kind of consistency across the network in such unusual times.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you've got time, I'm happy to run you through the list quickly of the best practice items we want to talk to the dealers about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for us, the great phase 1, level 1, the dealer should have a COVID statement, should be marketing our 7-day return policy, should be talking about their capabilities through social media, should have a new car stock list, should be able to offer their customers virtual appointments, personalised videos, customer reviews, part exchange car valuation, and a finance calculator. That's worth £5,000 to our dealer network. And then if they are willing to adopt click to reserve in live chat, that's a further £2,500. And lastly, if they put in place a full end-to-end click to buy solution, we'll top it up to £10,000. So they're all straightforward, achievable items, some of which will require a little bit of investment, but most of all are about customer messaging.
And I suppose really from this then, sorry, Curtis, this is, I mean, potentially some of these moves to get up to the tier 2, tier 3, then that's investing in the future, isn't it, essentially, because that's not just for now, that's future investment in that digital space.
Exactly. I mean, we've seen digital move on, we've seen customer behaviour change. I don't think this will be the first lockdown. I think we'll see some sort of restrictions for a little while yet. So whilst it will improve our revenue this quarter, it's more about getting ourselves fit for next year, Curtis and Philip.
Yeah. Now, you're investing up to £10,000 per dealership, and that's payable in December. And you've got a budget of £1.5 million for this programme. What kind of response have you had so far from the network?
Yeah, it's been really positive. Social media commentary has been really good on the story, and the dealers are really supportive. We've always tried to work with our dealers to be partners in progress. The dealers have been really, really pleased to at last get the list. And now I'm getting lots of emails with questions, which show me that they're seriously working on the digital capability, which is just what I wanted to happen.
So, I mean, with that then, is it? I mean, obviously, is there a time scale? And apologies if you've mentioned it before, but is there a time scale for these tiers, or is it just as and when they can demonstrate that they've adopted those tier 2, tier 3, that then the support comes in? Because this is about payment in December, isn't it? So is there a time element associated with it?
Yeah, there is. In my experience, nothing as far as genius like a tight deadline.
We know about that, don't we, Phil?
Yeah.
So we said to the dealers we're going to order them on December the 14th.
Yeah.
And that's the time when they'll get assessed against their earnings. So they've got a month.
So that keeps them pretty well focused then.
I think so. That's the plan.
Yes. And have you got plans for any further initiatives with this then? I mean, so is this kind of, because obviously what you don't want to do is the ones that don't potentially miss tier 2, tier 3 on the 14th of December, or do we look at that on the 15th of December to see where you're at then?
I think so. I think we take a range check and see where we get to in December, and then review our plans going forward. I think the key message for me was you can't save your way to success in this marketplace. You've got to invest in the future, and we're trying to encourage our dealers to do that. I saw an Auto Trader report yesterday that said that 28% of buyers were nervous about buying in this current situation. I think anything that any dealer can do to reassure customers that they're safe places to do business with on their terms, it's got to be good for our industry and good for the future.
And finally, Dale, can you take us through any feedback you've had from dealers in England this week during the first week of lockdown? And how's the morale looking, and how's business looking?
I think the feedback is it's definitely quiet, but there's still business to be had. Morale's good. I think we're much better placed to face a lockdown than we were the first time. We've learned a lot, and dealers have already got the processes in place to create some revenue. So whilst it's not great, it's nowhere near as bad as it was the first lockdown. So we're seeing some satisfactory results.
Yeah, and we will actually be looking at Wales in a minute. And any feedback on your dealers in Wales to their fire break? Because that was a 17-day period, and it was very strict.
The feedback is it was very, very quiet during the fire break. But things have increased significantly the minute the brakes was lifted.
Yes.
So I think we're definitely going to see a bounce back in Wales. We're already seeing an increase in volumes in those territories.
Yeah,
and I think you made the point well there. I think we are, although it is a second lockdown, the restrictions are slightly different in this one compared to the first one. But it's not, there is measures that were in place. There was procedures and policies in place from the first one that took a while to implement, didn't they, through the lockdown one, as it's now been referred to, and getting PPE equipment in place, getting that social distancing procedures in place, which have really remained in place, haven't they, since the first lockdown. So actually, the network is better placed for this second time round.
Exactly. For me, it's about mindset. There'll be winners and losers. We want to encourage people to do the things that the winners will do.
Yeah. Well, look, Dale, many thanks for joining us today. We really do appreciate your time. And, obviously, we both wish you and the network all the best as you work your way through this current lockdown.
Thanks, guys. Good to speak to you. Thanks for inviting me back.
And you're welcome back on any time, Dale. Just drop us a note if you want to come and talk about it. I mean, it's a great initiative, great incentive for the dealers. And I think the messaging is right. And like you say, that motivational side and creating the right sort of environment is the right thing. So anytime you want to come back on, just please reach out to Curtis or I, and you're welcome on any time.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Look after yourself.
Okay, so staying with car dealer and really sort of continuing that theme, because the headline is Welsh 17-day fire break lockdown had devastating impact on car dealers, with sales crawling to a halt. Now, the firebreak ended Monday this week, and this story from Car Dealer talks to a couple of dealers, but based, well, certainly with businesses in Wales who are affected. Wessex garages, so that they have sites across Wales and indeed southwest England. So, of course, they're in for a double whammy because they've come out of a lockdown in Wales and come into one in England. But in the story, Chris Wiseman, the MD of Wessex, he highlights what the firebreak looked like. So he said after sales were down 20%, with customers effectively told to delay servicing. And he also points out there was no clear direction on whether click and collect was allowed under the rules. So that would have hampered business considerably. He also says new and used inquiries were down, but the business was still taking deposits, and it was booking test drives for beyond the 9th when the firebreak was lifted.
Yeah, and I mean, you do feel. I mean, we mentioned it last week, and I mean, these initiatives like Dale's just been talking to is really got to help, the dealer network. But as you say, the things happening in Wales and different things happening in Scotland, different things happening in England, and some of these, as you pointed out there with Essex, they've got operations across both England and Wales. I'm not sure if they've got Scotland, but it impacts differently, and they've got to manage their way around it. But again, we've come out of that period, and there's a comment in there coming from Richard Hughes, who's the boss of White Dove Motor Group, and he talks about that the devastation effect of the lockdown, and that the first week sales were down 60%. So, and we mentioned this last week, didn't we, with the SMMT new car registration results, that the proportion of the results that were impacted from the Welsh lockdown at the end of October.
Yeah, because he goes on to say that sales in the second week of the lockdown were down 95%, and they ended up operating a digital service from their closed showrooms. But that was a tough experience for dealers across Wales, and let's hope they're seeing an upturn this week and onwards.
Yeah, so I mean, moving on, sticking with the subject of lockdown, but moving on to AM Online, and this is from Parker, as Curtis mentioned right at the start of the recording today, that Parker's finds 95% of car dealers remain in market despite lockdown. So they're trying to sort of talk around that, we've had our first lockdown, but this is up to date. This is talking about lockdown 2.0, as many people are referring to as, but saying that there's still people in the market for buying cars.
Yeah, so this was a survey they put on their website. So it is car buyers who go to Parker's. So these are in-market car buyers. And they found a total of 47% of respondents to the survey said that, they had not been affected in their decision to buy a vehicle as soon as possible. So they're still in market, they're still looking, which that is very positive news. And also 48% said that their buying journey had been impacted, but they still plan to continue researching their purchase and buy a car when the current restrictions are eased. So again, the cause for hope there. But interestingly, in the story, they also talk about some research that Parker's did elsewhere, which found that 30% of respondents actively engaged in purchasing or financing a new car would definitely take on a new car without leaving home during the COVID-19 pandemic, with a further 24% saying they would maybe consider it. So we talk about click and collect, and this is really showing how it's a new way of selling, it's a new way of thinking, it's a new mindset. So those figures are encouraging.
Yeah, and again, referring back to Dale's chat there, that there was obviously, they put that 3-tier level in, with the incentives to achieve the tier 2 and tier 3 where necessary. And it's all about that digital approach and that relationship between the dealer and the consumer. And we know that first lockdown, there were many people without the e-commerce, without that digital proposition to be able to engage with the customers. But many, as we spoke to at the time, didn't we, in our first phase of COVID-19 special interviews, many had brought forward their strategies if they didn't have it in place already. And I think that's where Parkers are talking now this time, that consumers can engage now in that digital space with majority of the dealer network and continue to review, look and purchase vehicles where necessary.
Yeah, and even going back to that story about Wessex, that they went on to say that they are operating digitally from one site in the southwest, because their sites in Wales have reopened, sites in England have closed, but they've got a digital plan in place. And this is what's differentiating this lockdown to the last one, because a lot of these measures are in place now.
Definitely. So we'll see. I mean, it's again, one thing I suppose is one way that we are in the fourth quarter, there was easing before this lockdown already starting to happen as the pent up demand started to disappear, to ease off slightly, I presume. And obviously, the fourth quarter does tend to slow down a little bit, but it's still going to impact many dealers as they sort of, look to the fourth quarter after such a strong, quarter of recovery following the first lockdown.
So you're listening to All the Chatter That Matters on the Motor Trade Radio podcast, brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group, the only weekly podcast serving the car retailing sector, and available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favourite podcasts.
Definitely. So we're heading over to Motor Trader now, and this connects with the conversation we started last week around salespeople's commissions and pay and things like this that was raised on last week's podcast. But this is in Motor Trader this week, and as again, story that Curtis alluded to at the start is that the average pay at dealer groups falls for the second year, and this is research I think we've covered numerous times on the podcast over the years from BDO, from doing their motor salary survey that they do on a regular basis, don't they?
Yes, yeah. This is we do cover this every year, and this year they found that the average pay package, excluding management positions, dropped from £40,000 in 2019 to £39,000 in 2020, and this stagnation was found across all departments. Base salaries, they increased by 3%, with incentives falling by 11%. So maybe a reflection of recent trading conditions there.
Yeah, and all respondents said that they'd used the coronavirus job retention scheme during the lockdown and beyond. We know that furloughing has been extended, and that they said that furloughing at least 80% of their workforce at its peak. So most dealers will add some staff on furlough despite the reopening of the showrooms in June. So it's looking that, obviously we've now got furlough going on till currently the end of March, as it was announced of the week. So again, it'll be interesting to see what happens on the next survey out of this as to what the support and what the average salary would be then.
Yeah, and moving on to AM Online, and the headline there is SMMT reports 4.4% Q3 used car sales growth. So a bit of good news, but not surprising, this one, because this is obviously the period July, August, September. So we'd come out of lockdown one, the UK showrooms were up and running from the beginning of July, and we did see a 4.4% increase in transactions. And it's worth pointing out that the SMMT data is looks at transactions that are pulled from the DVLA. So this is any used car transaction, be it retail or private. But yes, it was up. And so the total count for the quarter was 2.1 million vehicles changing hands. So that is a good positive sign, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean, it's 4.4% up on last year. That last year was just over 2 million at 2,076,000, but before that we'd seen a decline since the previous year of sort of 2.1. So this year, good result. It's kind of reflects obviously the pent up demand that everybody's been talking about, the return to either profitability or at least some balance of profit between loss and that they lost through that lockdown period. So again, great performance. The key is going to be is how long that goes into the month of October.
Yeah.
And what activity can take place in the fourth quarter, because the fourth quarter is normally around the 1.7, 1.8 million as a used car transactional marketplace, but over the years it has been down as low as 1.4 in the sort of the low period following the COVID, the financial crash of 2007, 2008. So again, a lot of focus on used cars at the minute, but obviously impeded by supply as well as a little more pressure on demand. But again, one that we'll be watching very closely.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out that growth was recorded in each month of the quarter, with the September plate change driving the biggest increase. So it was up 6.3% in September. And I'm pretty sure that's the strongest quarter for quite a few years now. So year to date, the market is down 17.5% to just over 5 million. And no surprise there, because Q1 and Q2 was down. Q2 was down dramatically because the UK was closed. But there's now 1 million fewer transactions in the year to date than there was this time last year.
Yeah, and again, we interviewed Darren Martin from KPHPI last week. It's worth revisiting that if you've not heard it, and he does talk about obviously what to expect in this fourth quarter, and we were talking a little bit around what to expect from this second lockdown, around the restrictions of activity and what impact that could have and what they're going to do from a valuations perspective. So again, luckily we are in this fourth quarter now, but it's just a case of getting through it and where we can build the market for the first quarter of next year.
And finally, I think it's time for that drink.
I think for those ones that want to get through it, then yeah, there's an investment for you. I'll just sit and have a nice little drink to either commiserate or celebrate your performance, really. But you can get this is for my friends at Motoring Research, but yeah, Elon Musk, he's now entered the tequila world as well, which is quite an interesting one, which I think we were talking before the recording that I think it started off as a April's Fool's joke in 2018, but it's now reality, and you can order a bottle of tequila that is produced by Tesla, which is an interesting one.
Tesla tequila, it will cost you £190 a bottle, but they've sold out. It's a limited edition. Not sure how many bottles were produced, but it's a limited run, which is now sold out. And we were. It's worth heading over to Motoring Research to see this story, because they've got photographs of the bottle. Now, the bottle is actually the shape of a lightning bolt, and we were kind of querying how easy or how difficult it is to actually pour it. And if you're paying £190 for a bottle, you're not going to want to spill much, are you?
No, you don't. I mean, it does look nice. But I say, first thing I did was click to see whether they were still available, and no, they're not. At the minute, they are out of stock. They do describe it as the Tesla Tequila, an exclusive premium 100% tequila, aged in French oak barrels, featuring a dry fruit and light vanilla nose with a balanced cinnamon pepper finish. If anybody is a tequila connoisseur, unless you just like it with a slice of lemon and a bit of salt, but a slice of lime, sorry, and a bit of salt, but
and down in one.
Yes. Then I'm sure the cinnamon tones are irrelevant at that point. But yeah, you can't get it. But yeah, it is always interesting, isn't it? I mean, if one thing from Elon Musk and Elon Musk and Tesla is they do grab the headlines, don't they, with these kind of things?
They do, yeah. And these brand extensions, they're always interesting. I seem to recall there was a BMW bicycle, Bentley perfume, and I'm sure there was some Aston Martin cufflinks. And from time to time, the car brands do look at extending the brand somewhat.
They do. But keep an eye on this one. It may be what you want to get in for Christmas for somebody if they do come back into stock. But they are limiting you to 2 bottles per purchase, so you can only spend $500 on coupon if you so wish. But I think that's it for this week. I mean, trying to keep it limited short because we had the interview there at the start of the show with Dale Wyatt, and we wish Dale and all his network the best with the incentives that they've put in place. Initially, the reaction is extremely positive as Dale went through. And I say, don't miss the interview that we had with Darren Martin last week. That's still available to download and listen to. We talked about the value expectations going into the fourth quarter, but lots of headlines again, and we're trying to get through them as best as possible.
Yeah, but that is all for this week's Headlines Roundup. Thanks again to Suzuki boss Dale Wyatt for joining today's show. You've been listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. Join Philip and I again next weekend for all the chatter that matters. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.